We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm super excited to have my colleague David here with me today. He's
Hi,
on
everyone.
We're going to be talking about unpacking the college essay process using case studies from real LogicPrep students who have worked with David in the past on their essay coaching process. So this webinar is really designed to give you an inside look into not only what the essay writing process looks like, but specifically how our LogicPrep essay coaches help to guide and shape the writing process for our students and really help them show up with amazing, compelling, interesting essays at the end of the day. So a little bit of background about us as your presenters. I'm Olivia. If you've been on any of our webinars in the last couple of years, you have probably seen me or at least heard my voice. I'm our director of content and narrative here at LogicPrep. So I manage basically all of our content. That includes our blog, our social media, our events. So I'm participating in a lot of our events, but I also work on the college advising team as a former college admissions counselor. I provide a lot of guidance to students who are looking to apply to colleges, primarily in the US and Canada. And then David is also here to talk with us as well.
Hey, hi, everyone. So my name is David. I have been at LogicPrep for a long time, for about 15 years. And actually, our CEO, Lindsay, and I really started this wing of LogicPrep. Initially, we helped tutor people for the SAT or ACT or classes, but then Lindsay and I wondered, could we also help people with the college admissions process? We found out we loved it. We found out we were good at it, but we also then welcomed so many people on board who had actual experience, like Olivia, in the admissions offices, and really upped our game and really developed a system and a process that we were happy about. I actually work with all the other essay coaches as feedback, as guide, as a coach with them. So I really know a lot about what everyone is doing in this side of LogicPrep. And then finally, you'll see under my name, it also says playwright. I am a playwright. I write plays and musicals, and that is important for this work because I do think there's an overlap. I think that what a playwright hopefully does is put words on a page that just fly off the page and allow you to see that character and hopefully allow you to root for that character. And each of the students we work with is a beautiful, real person, but at a certain point, there are going to be words on a page. And part of our job as the essay coach and as the whole team is to make sure that those words on a page tell a story, that they create a version of the student where we really can hear their voice and we really can start rooting for what their goals are.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Mhm.
So a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. Quick reminder, there is a Q&A function here on your Zoom screen, so you should see that either on the top or bottom of your screen. Please put questions in the Q&A throughout. We're actually going to ask for questions from the audience in between each of our case studies, so that if you have specific questions about a certain essay or the process that David is describing, you won't forget those by the end. But we will also have time for questions at the end as well. So if you want to hold on to something until the end, you can wait and ask it then. But feel free to throw those in the Q&A at any point, because we'll be referring back to that throughout the process. So we're going to be going through 5 different sections today. We're starting with a really quick overview just of what we mean when we talk about the essay coaching process. We'll also talk about each of our case studies. So we have our first case study is a student we're naming Cassie. Our second case study is a student we're naming Enrique. And our third is a student we're naming Maria. We will get to her if we have time for her. We may not. And so if that happens, we may skip Maria and just go straight to our parting advice for our final slide to help all of you get a good sense of what to do and not to do when you are getting ready to write your essays. So we'll get started just by talking about college essays in a nutshell. What do we mean when we say we're talking about the college essay process? So David, what does this mean? What does this process look like?
Great. So the college essay process is each essay coach is going to work really closely not only with the student and their family, but also with the college advisor. So the college essay process is really making sure every written thing, everything that's not just like a resume, but your personal statement, which is the 650-word real introduction to yourself, to any supplement like why this school, or tell us what community you're a part of, really tells a coherent story, acts as the glue of the entire application, but also gives us angles into the student that we might not get anywhere else in the application. And the college essay process is how we describe the relationship between each essay coach and each student as they meet, as they brainstorm, as they go through the process of, we almost always start with that main essay, but then go through the process of each school. And together, that usually takes us the whole season. And that is the college essay process.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So let's
Great.
talk a bit about
Yes.
each section.
Yeah, so to go a little more granularly. Okay, so the first introductions after hopefully a kickoff meeting with everyone involved is the college essay coach will sit down with the student via Zoom or Google and ask a lot of questions. So that means both questions that come to mind. That means both a list of sort of icebreaker questions like, what's your favorite book? Or, and if they don't like reading, I always want to hear it, although hopefully they like reading. Do they have any collections? What are they bad at? You know, just anything that's going to create a connection and get to know who that kid is. Might ask them what kind of student they are and what their goals are for college, even if that's not going to be part of the essay process, just to understand holistically how the essay is going to work in there. Then we'll go through the 6 essay prompts. Those are the things that the Common App gives you as possible prompts to write that essay about. And as we talk and use our experience and intuition, we're going to hone in on what makes the kid excited when they talk. You know, so that's about experience. It's also about instinct. Like, where does the person's eyes light up? Where do they speak a little quicker? Where do you just sense them keeping returning to in the conversation? At the same time, an essay coach has to use their expertise to figure out how we can make that sincere, truthful, maybe funny, maybe very serious story have a structure that makes it feel complete, because it's not just a pouring out of yourself as like a journal. There should be a sense that there's a hook, that if someone holds up the piece of paper and is like, I like this kid, that maybe they have a way to say it, like, oh, I like this kid, this is the kid, the service shelter kid, or this is the car kid, or you know, like, not that the kid is just that, but the sense that the essay has some sense of completeness and wholeness that allows you to grab onto it and feels like, honestly, that kid is ready for college because they know how to structure an essay like this. And
Totally.
then after we have that, we are working towards a final draft of that, of everything, but really that first essay. And that 650-word essay is among the more important things in your application. And it's one of the most important things you still have control over as you're doing this process. And working towards the final draft, most all of our tutors, essay coaches, have done other writing in their lives. They're either playwrights or novelists or short story writers, or they've worked in an admissions office, people who have a strong sense of what makes good writing. And you'll see we have some very specific questions that aren't like teaching a child to be Tolstoy, but teaching a kid how to focus the writing into getting really, really clear, good sentences that ultimately make the kid's voice shine, and most importantly, makes us root for them.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's take a look at our first case study that we have today. So this is a student we're calling Cassie. Cassie is not her real name, but to protect her privacy, we're going with that. So a couple of details just about Cassie so you can understand kind of where her background is. She applied in 2022. She worked with David on her essays. She attended Horace Greeley High School in New York. And then she was looking to apply to education and then potentially math as a secondary interest as well. So those were the primary academic interests that she listed on her application. And as far as outcomes, so you get a perspective on what her admission process ended up looking like. She decided to apply ED1 at Vanderbilt. She did not get into Vanderbilt, unfortunately, but she did, however, get accepted in early action at UVA, as well as University of Richmond and University of Pittsburgh. She actually ended up deciding to commit to UVA after getting that acceptance and withdrew the rest of her applications. So for most of her school, she actually never heard back, but she was really thrilled with her opportunity to go to UVA and study education. And from the essay side, I'm going to let David talk a little bit about kind of what we're approaching here for her as well.
Great. So what you're about to see after we're done this slide is I've created a document based on a Google Doc that I usually create the first session, and that every college coach will create the first session or the second session, which is just a transcription of that conversation. And most often it is the essay coach who is just typing, almost like a stenographer, but also like an interviewer, also like a reporter, just asking questions and writing down information, and then together using that to start getting a real sense of what the main essay should be about. So you're going to see a lot of typos, perhaps, but and it's going to be a little bit of a blur because we're just going to scroll down it, but you'll get a sense of the real like nitty gritty of what happens. So here, I'd like you to focus on, as I go through this process, a few key ideas. One, you'll soon see this student had a really strong idea for the central story, but then how do we create a narrative to highlight that? How does the essay coach find a way to give that structure and form so there's forward momentum? And then the other thing is, how do we get to better writing? Like, what is good writing? It can be a very daunting question for anyone, certainly for a 17-year-old, especially when asked to do something very personal, like reflect on your life, and your college application depends on it. So what kinds of questions do we ask? And you'll see a few examples of how that works. So let's jump in on this. It's not going to be a fancy document, but we are not fancy. So here it's titled Intro and Session 1 and 2. So I can speak to this one because she was my student, but any essay coach is going to do the same. So first you're asking, what's your major and what are your top schools? This might not be important for the essay, but it allows an essay coach to view holistically how it's going to function. What kind of student? What were their ACT or SAT scores? And then often a college, an essay coach, and certainly I do, will ask a ton of questions. I personally start with the cheesiest one, which is, what do you love? What brings you happiness? And please don't lie. I don't ever want someone speaking what they think a college wants to hear, and I know no college essay coach wants that. So luckily, as is often the case, friends and family is often the first answer. But then we go deeper. We find out, in this case, she loves math, that she's not a reader. Great, some people aren't. That she loves a country house, that she has some songs she loves. She also is like, no, I don't have any fears and I don't have any collections. If you scroll down, you can see more of these kinds of questions. Things like, what are you awful at? And that's probably not going to wind up in an essay, but it might build trust. And you never know, it might. If someone says, I'm awful at hockey, but I love it so much that I'm at every game at my high school, maybe that's going to be part of the essay. I don't know. So if we scroll down, you can start to see that after these questions like this, and you'll see in this case, the essay coach, and it was me, bolded how the AIDS epidemic. That was just a sort of memory thing, because the student got so excited, saying, what was something in school that you were really impressed with? In this case, what were you good at? And she went on and on about this project she did that meant so much to her, about tracing the early rise of the AIDS epidemic, that it was like, oh, maybe we'll return to this. Maybe there's something here. It turned out there wasn't, honestly, but that's the kind of free form conversation you have. So the prompts then are the Common App essay prompts. So that 650-word personal statement, which every college receives, unless they're California or Texas, or a few exceptions, is so important. And they give you 6 prompts to jump off of. And almost always we do jump off those 6 prompts, although there is a 7th prompt, write whatever you want. So we, for a moment, pretend each of these prompts is the only one we can answer, and we go deep on them. So this one is about background, identity, interest, and talent, and something that's essential to the story. So even if it's not essential to her story, an essay coach is going to ask what they are. So in this case, she was Jewish. She had a grandma who was a Holocaust survivor. Didn't prove to be a huge part of it, but again, it could have. Talking about interests, this student talked about the service work she does and how important it is to her. And here's where you'll see it's highlighted in yellow, because already I got the sense that this was a student who had a key, vital, life-changing experience working at a women's shelter that tied in with her feminism, with her desire to help others, with her desire to work with kids. And it seemed pretty quickly to align with her major, which is about education. So it felt like this is probably where it's going to be. But you'll see asking really key, really specific questions. So what did you do? We fundraised money to decorate. Okay, what does decorating mean? We picked out the furniture. How did you do the furniture? We looked up designs. We installed things. So really getting really granular answers to the questions, even if none of this is quote unquote good writing yet. So if you scroll down, you'll still see more that she loves dogs. Great. That there were things in school she didn't do as well as she wanted to. If you keep scrolling, you can see we went through all 6 of the prompts. And she, in fact, for some of the other prompts, she went back to that service thing. And I again highlighted in yellow. So scrolling down, you'll see that this is a lot of what we did in the first session, and honestly, for the first 2 sessions. So then for homework in the first session, I asked, what is an activity or community that you feel really, really tied to, really important about? And she talked about dance. She actually hadn't even mentioned that before, but I was like, great, I love a dance essay, especially if you're not majoring in dance. Maybe dance is going to shine a light on some aspect of you that through my experience as an essay coach, I know how to retrain back onto the things you actually care about. Spoiler alert, in this case, it did not exactly, but it was great. And we ended up using it for an activity essay. So she wrote a lot of stuff and it's all in blue. She was great at doing her homework. And every essay coach will demand that. Every essay coach works hard. Every student has to work hard. So we together decided the shelter was probably where the essay was going to land. So then for the second week for homework, I gave some very specific prompts. Every essay coach will do this to make the writing feel easier. So starting the sentence and asking the student to answer. What did I think of the shelter before I'd ever gone in? How did I come to volunteer there? What did I learn about the people? So you can see that, again, we're not yet getting to quote unquote great writing. We are getting to the ingredients of great writing, which is specifics. And here I'd like to draw attention to even more about that. So this is the homework she came in with. And just reading the stuff in yellow, she wrote, the shelter is something that I pass every day of my life. In middle school, I walked to school every day. Since this shelter was right on my way to school from my house, I would walk with the kids who were currently living there. Great. So aside from the fact that there's some repetitions, which are easily fixed, more importantly, it doesn't really thing yet. It doesn't really jump off the page. I'm sort of rooting for her because she's doing some good work in the world, which is great, but I don't feel it yet. And I'm always looking for feeling it. So if we scroll down, you can see, and I highlighted this again in yellow, in that session after she brought in this homework, I showed her that sentence. The shelter is something that I pass by every day. So I asked specific questions and she wrote in session, what did the shelter look like? How far away? If you pass by it every day, it must be close to your home. Literally, how close to your home is it? So she wrote, the shelter is a blue building that gets little sunlight. It is literally tucked away. It is on the corner of my street, 2-minute walk away. So again, it's not the writing that you'd submit with, but I hope you're feeling that it's better writing, that it's writing that grabs you a little bit more and it shows someone with a keener eye. And this is her writing, but this is writing based on the conversation happening between an essay coach and a student. Great. If we had more time, we'd go through all of these examples, but I think you can get an idea of how this works. She said, the next one, I would walk with kids who were currently living there. And I was like, I don't even fully understand that. They're living there, you're walking, just tell me more, tell me more. And either she would write or I would write down what she said. So if we keep scrolling, we can see more of these this is a process. This takes a few weeks and an hour is a time together, 55 minutes is a time together. So there's even more, the Google Doc is even bigger and messier than this. So I hope you want to know that this is a cleaned up document. So if we keep going, you're going to keep seeing this blue text. Now we get onto some drafts coming together, pulling together from those ingredients, her showing how to put it together into paragraphs. Again, this is nowhere near a finished draft, but The shelter is a blue building. If you go up a tiny bit, that gets a little sunlight. It is literally tucked away. It is on the corner of my street, only 2-minute walk away, but in a different world. So you can see how it's already a better beginning. If we keep scrolling down, you're going to see that dialogue in different colors and fonts and, ripping apart things and putting them back together. But if you go down, you're going to see her first quote unquote spill draft. So this is now something where she goes for homework, and usually by session 3, but sometimes by session 4, the essay coach will say, now, take everything you've learned, everything we've talked about, write me a spill draft. I don't care how long it is. In this case, it's a nice length. It's 820 words, almost 200 words too long, but that's amazing because it means there's editing work and there's extraneous stuff. And great, if we keep going, let's just look a little bit more. Great. So the final version of the essay, which well, actually, it might be a thing for me. I put it in green just so I know, but some other essay coaches do it because I train them. So I just want to talk a tiny bit about a few things here. The not us I highlighted because it was bolded. So sometimes an essay coach will tell a student, hey, you can have a little fun with the formatting to make your essay pop. With this structure, we went chronologically, and that is, you would think it's obvious, but she said something like, in homework, I've always cared about other people, or I walked it by every day. There's no story there. The story has to have a start and then a series of events and then a moment of recognition. This is the playwright part of me, but this is something every essay coach does. I train them, and also they're also writers. So we go chronologically where the shelter was when she first saw it, her introducing herself. I'm just going to the topic sentences so you can see how the flow is. And then some specifics. In 2020, she wanted to deepen her relationship. If you scroll up, if you scroll, you can see we're just narrating now very closely her experience. If we jump to another topic sentence, I wanted to do more, so I proposed tutoring the kids weekly. Back at my school, I made a speech about domestic violence. So we're looking for ways that even if the student didn't know it connected, with an essay coach can be like, well, where did this lead to? How did this change you? What else did you do in the same direction? Because an essay shouldn't just be a frozen moment in time of this is what happened and this is what I think about it, but rather this is a key moment in my life and it's continually moving forward. And now when I go to your college, I will continue moving it forward from there. So if we were looking at all of this, there's so much more I could say, but hopefully this gave you a good idea of someone who had a pretty clear idea of what she wanted to write about and a pretty clear idea of how the essay would fit in with the rest of her application, but nonetheless had a lot of work to get from a brainstorming session to an essay that really could help her application soar.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David, for taking us through that. I feel like that was really helpful. I'd love to see if anybody has questions for David about this particular student and this particular essay process. So I'll take a look at the Q&A for a moment or two. And if we don't see any questions within the next probably 30, 60 seconds, we'll just move on. And please let us know if you have any questions that come up.
And while you're typing that, I'll just mention a little bit more about our process in that this happened to be a pretty shy student. The next student we'll go through is a very extroverted student. And so part of the challenge was for any essay coach is meeting the student where they live and not asking them to be anything other than themselves. If someone is a little bit shy and takes a while to talk, it's not the essay coach's job or even desire to make them into someone who loves talking and loves writing. It's to take what is there and develop it. And as long as the student is game to work hard, then we will always meet the student where they live and try and pull that voice out. And if we ever feel like the voice in the essay starts to not feel like the voice of the student because they're trying to write to impress us or to impress a college, that's something we'll underline and be like, no, how would you say it? And we can always do that and get to great writing.
Absolutely. It looks like we are getting some questions in the Q&A, which is
Great.
awesome. The first one is just asking about how many sessions, which I can speak to a little bit just from a technical standpoint. So Typically, our students that are doing a full package with us, whether that's an application package or an essay package, are doing about 20 or so sessions total with their essay coach. However, they are unlimited packages, so there is no restriction on the number of sessions you have. Some students will have more, some will have less. We've had students that have like written an entire draft for a personal statement and then scrapped it and started over because they decided it wasn't working. And that's okay. We work with you through all of those things. But most students will tend to do around 20 sessions to get through both their personal statement and all of their supplemental essays for each college. We do also do hourly work as well. So for students that maybe just want a few sessions of help here and there with editing, or they just want help with the personal statement, students can sign up for just a certain number of hourly sessions as well. And then a more kind of in-depth question, I think this one's great. So how do you make sure it doesn't seem like you're I think what they meant to say was exploiting people in need, the people in need situation. So I think that's a great question, David, because we do have a lot of
Uh,
students that will write about service experiences they've had or people in need that they have helped in some capacity. How do you make sure that kind of topic is, doesn't sound like exploiting or doesn't sound like, oh, look at me, I'm the great person who helped these people that were so needy, right?
yeah.
How do you get to that in a positive way?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few ways to approach that. First thing I will say that there's certain kinds of essays. If someone takes a service trip to help other people, that can be written about. Anything can be written about, but I would usually advise against that because then you would get that implication. And definitely, if the lesson a kid learns is, and it sometimes is the first thing they say, and it's valid, is I learned how lucky I am, which means sort of how privileged I am compared to these other people that I helped. That leaves a bad taste in one's mouth too. So it's mostly a question of whether someone genuinely seems to want to help, whether they can write about it eloquently. Uh, the devil is in the details, as it were. You know, if someone is foregrounding themselves too much, as opposed to like, saying like, aren't I amazing for helping? Yeah, that'll leave a bad taste in one's mouth. And you know, part of an essay coach's role, and this happens a lot, is to say, hey, you're amazing. You did something amazing. But let me tell you what an admissions officer might think when they see this sentence. And it's just being really honest, like, there's nothing wrong with what you wrote, but I think it might come off like this because we are older and we have seen a lot of essays and we do know more about what those admissions officers are thinking than a student does. So if ever there's that sense that the kid is exploiting people, then no. But also, you can be really upfront in writing. You can say, you know, I hesitated to write this because I worried that it would seem like I wanted to take advantage of their pain. But no, let me tell you what I did. And sometimes that's enough. Usually, when someone speaks from the heart, that the feeling they had when writing it flies off the page. So I'm not too worried about that, but that's a very valid question, and it is something that is in every essay coach's head.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for addressing that. I appreciate it. Another person was asking about what was the extracurricular activity in focus in the writing, and I think maybe what they're asking about was the sort of foray that you guys did into talking about dance, and then sort of
Mhm.
returning to talking about this service project and why you did that.
Well, speaking for this case, because I worked on this one, um, when it's all done, it sort of feels like it's inevitable. The same way, like when a kid ends up at a college, you're like, of course they were going to go there. So in retrospect, it's a bit of a detour, but at the moment, it didn't necessarily feel like a detour because we weren't sure what the essay would be about. But we did know, okay, this is almost definitely not going to be wasted work because if this is an activity this student has done as much as they have, then it's worth writing about because for sure there will be some school that has a talk about a community you're a part of, talk about an activity you did, and I'm often looking slash every essay coach is looking for balance. So if this is a student whose main essay is very sincere, which it is about doing good in the world, maybe we make sure we find the activity essay not to be about tutoring, which is too close but also important, but something fun. Let's see the fun side of this person. And she had a great fun dancing. She wasn't like a come into the room and crack jokes, but she was someone who really enjoyed dancing. And in an activity essay, capturing that spirit was important. So yeah, there's no wasted work when you're writing something important to you. even if it doesn't end up in the final essay.
Awesome. Yeah. And a quick reminder to everyone, for those of you who aren't super familiar with the process, most students are going to apply to at least 10 or 12 different colleges. And most colleges will have at least one or two essay prompts they ask you to respond to. So the personal statement is the sort of the largest and most significant essay that students will write because it's the one they send to basically every college. But there are also so many other smaller opportunities for students to weave in other elements of their story and other pieces. So when David's talking about the activity essay, that's a very popular supplemental essay prompt that a lot of colleges use. And so it's something that most students are going to write and submit to at least one or two of their colleges. So it's very helpful oftentimes to have some of that additional writing that maybe doesn't go in the personal statement, but can show up elsewhere in an activity essay, in a why this college essay, in a leadership experience essay, in a values-driven essay. So there's so many different pieces that go into the full application package outside of the personal statement, even though that's what we're focusing on today.
And actually, the next student, whenever we get to him, the next student, Enhiki, this is a really great example of someone with a few different key activities. And part of the job of an essay coach, working with the college advisor and the student and their family, is what goes where. What is the main color we're painting in these essays, and what's the shadow color, or the secondary color, or if they're applying to this kind of major, how in that specific pool, which story is going to make them pop the most. So there's some strategic thinking. That's not the first and foremost thing, because you really want to hear the voice, but strategic thinking is a big part of the process.
For sure, absolutely, and the college advisor helps with that a lot as well. We have a one more question for
Great.
this essay, asking about. I was told that the personal essay should give a quote flavor of the student. So should we stick to one theme or provide a range? And I think this kind of speaks to what we were just talking about with the complementary colors. So I'm not sure if you have anything else you want to add to that, David.
I think, I mean, there's a few ways. There's a few ways to answer that. The first thing is, if the idea is just to give like a collection of attributes or a collection of flavors, that won't be an incisive hit. That won't be like the quick hit of this is what the personal statement is, and this is someone telling me something very important to them, and I'm hearing it. So it has to have, I think, some of that sense of urgency. I will say that there's some aspect, if someone, it didn't happen in this essay, but let's say dancing was a bigger part of her life, we might have found ways in the essay to be like, normally on a Saturday, I'd be dancing with my dance troupe, but this Saturday, I knew I wanted to go to the shelter. So there's certain ways you can like make sure the reader understands that a person is bigger than this one story. But the resume is there, and the activity, like the list of activities, is there to give an overview of what kinds of things the student is into. The main essay should give a real sense of what it's like to be in the room with the student and to make us root for some aspect of their personality. And the whole goal of the essay is to have them toggle the switch and go, yes, I want this person here. It's not to be like, oh, now I fully understand this person. So those are similar, but those are slightly different. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. I do think that answers the question. And one thing I'll say too is I kind of like to think of it as sprinkles, right? So that you have sort of the main flavor. So let's say you have your ice cream flavor that you've chosen for it, and then you might have a variety of flavors of sprinkles that you sort of add in on top, and that really provides like just a little extra color, a little extra flavor to the primary story that you're telling as a student. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that as we go through the other case studies. So let's talk a little bit about Enhiki. We'll give you guys another chance to ask questions at the end of this one as well. So a bit of background about Enhiki. He also was an applicant in 2022 working with David. He was a student at Colégio Visconde de Porto Seguro, that's in Brazil. And he was looking to major in economics and business. So he's coming at this process as an international student, looking to apply to colleges in the US with an interest in both of these areas. His outcomes, he applied ED1 at Northwestern. He was deferred during that application process and actually never got his final decision from Northwestern because he applied ED2 to Vanderbilt and was accepted. And then also was accepted in at UNC and Babson in their early action processes. So again, with him, similar to Cassie, we don't have results from all of the colleges he applied to because he did withdraw the rest of his applications, but he was able to be really successful in his ED2 application at Vanderbilt. So we're going to talk a little bit about the essay that helped him get there.
So he was a challenge because they're both great. He was the opposite of Cassie. He's incredibly extroverted, had a ton of different stories, had several things that got him excited and talking quickly. In fact, almost everything got him excited. So it was a pleasure to talk to. He was a little bit more challenging to figure out what the main essay should be about. So as we look at his document, you're going to see a primary question that an essay coach wrestles with, and usually in concert with the college advisor, what story goes where. And if someone we know is going to be majoring in business, then we can be pretty confident there's going to be a supplement that's like why this school, or often even why business. So that is really factoring in the team's collective brain that there has to be a good answer for that as well. So that might not go into the main essay, even if it's the most important thing. But you'll see where this went to. And in this case, he had a very successful essay beginning in a direction he never would have imagined for himself. So this was a case, and I have a lot of other essay coaches call me and we talk about this, where part of your job is if you believe in something, to encourage the bravery of like, I'm just going to say what I actually think, or I'm just going to say who I am. And then as they read it out loud, or as they show it to people and people get excited, then they're like, oh, I can do this. And that's an amazing feeling, because you want success for everyone, but one definition I have of success is when they hit the send button, that the kid is like, this is who I am. I worked my butt off. I believe this tells my story. I believe I'm a good candidate. I hope they agree, but I know I've done my best. And so that is something we work for. So going to this application, this document, you'll see that this student led with some really vulnerable things. I don't know if it was right away. Yeah, identity struggle. So very open, very relaxed. The thing that this student was proudest about was that they did a finance podcast. And it took a lot of bravery, a lot of hard work. My secret thought working with him was, oh, this is going to be the main essay because this is a big thing. And he got a lot of important guests. It had a wide reach in Brazil to students who might not have been in a school that had a finance class or an economics class. I asked some real big questions like, what is your goal? And he answered big, which is to leave a big intellectual footprint. So it's like, okay, that's big. He wants finance to be relevant in the world. And so sometimes a kid will have a very strong sense of what their mission is. That doesn't mean it's what the main essay is going to be about. But it's always good for an essay coach and a college advisor to know what are their goals, what are they thinking. So you can see some of the notes about super score and straight A's for the ACT, but also that he started a mental health club at his school, and that definitely made me go, oh, that's really interesting, especially a young man doing that. Not to gender this too much, but life is gendered, and fewer young men ask for the help they need, unfortunately. So I thought the fact that he did, and that he wanted to be in business, I thought that's a voice I might want in my classroom. So as you can tell, any essay coach, any college advisor is often projecting themselves into what that admissions officer is thinking. And we don't know, but we have experience and we have a good gut intuition, and we use that gut intuition. Great. So if we scroll down, you'll see this is a kid who loves a lot. But again, the first thing he said was meaningful change. It's like, okay, I was looking for something, like Panjikeju, but meaningful change. He also loves languages, and we bonded over that because I love languages. He's like, I actually love museums. I was like, great, a young person who actually loves museums, fascinating. He loved music, Frank Sinatra, Gene Kelly, Louis Armstrong. I love classic American music from the 40s, 50s, and 60s as well. So we bonded over that. But even if I hadn't, I would have been like, well, that's individuating. So that's a word I often go to, which is like not just what makes a kid light up, but what makes a kid in a pool of 100 seem different? What makes them seem separate? It doesn't have to be the most important thing about them, but if it's a thing that grabs my attention because I haven't seen a candidate like that, that can't hurt. So, what do you, he believes people make their own luck. So he had a lot of beliefs about that that are big philosophical thoughts. It's interesting. One of the things for homework, I said, what are 10 things you want any college to know about you? Again, he led in a very earnest way. I'm incredibly persistent. Most important of everything is a qualitative idea. Even though I'm a misanthrope, I would never let someone say that. That means someone who hates people, not for college. But so these are really sincere answers. If we scroll down, you might start to see that um, I was getting a little sad because the person I was talking to was curious and engaged with so many cultural aspects of the world. And yet, whenever he had a chance to write, he was very serious, like he was writing a business prospectus, which I think might be great for a business school, but also is probably what most other business students sound like. And I wanted to make sure that his actual personality found a structure to allow his voice to continue. So if we keep scrolling down, you'll see that we went over the prompts. The first prompt, I said, what's your identity? And again, a very vulnerable human. He said, I'm a survivor. I feel like I survived my mom's madness. I was like, okay. I always give the ground rules, and every essay coach does. You can say whatever you want. This is a safe space. You also don't have to say anything more than you want to. Like, you don't have to like lay out, this is the worst thing that happened to me, to build trust or to get a college to say yes to you. But if you want to, if that's an important thing for you, we are here. We're all people who've seen the gamut of human experience. So great. So he told a long story about his mom. Told a long story, and the blue was actually homework he brought in. It's slightly in reversed order, about the finance podcast. And you'll see the same sorts of things where I ask very specific questions, write down the answers in bullet points. And I asked, what's the outlier episode? What's this? What's that? Did he ever have to fire someone? I don't know. It came to mind as he was talking, and he told me about it. You never know. That could have been a vulnerable but honest accountability moment that would make an essay pop, because it's not what you expect to say to a college, and stuff like that. So if we keep going down, we might see, yes. So this is me writing you, the reader, right now a note. This would not have been in the document. This is like, at the end of this, there were two things he kept circling back to: his moment of transition breaking away from his mom, and his finance podcast. And so then we were, and secretly in my head, I was like, you'll see DZ's concern, it's David Zelnick. There's so much energy and curiosity about culture, and this is not being reflected, or this might not be reflected. So we had to really get all the stuff on paper. It's always easier to figure out what an essay should be, especially with a hardworking student, by seeing actually what things look like on the paper. So he wanted to talk about his mom. I knew in my head that was a little bit dangerous, but I wanted him to write that. Any essay coach should be encouraged to let the student write what they want to write, and let themselves be surprised. Like, oh, I didn't think that would work, but it does. And in this case, he ends up talking about his mom. If you scroll down, you'll see one thing we at LogicPrep like to do, which is, so this is very me, but a lot of other essay coaches will do it. If someone says they broke up with their mom, I want to know, what are the plot points? That's me as a playwright talking, but other people have their different language. Literally, what age did your parents split? When did your father move here? When did your mother do here? Like what is the nitty gritty? Because so many people write really quickly and kind of sloppily, and an essay coach has to make them write specifically. So the notion was, by the end of homework number 2 is, can we hold off on mom's stuff till we know more about you? So that was me pushing back as an essay coach, but after having talked to the college advisor and really getting his buy-in. If he had said, no, I really want to open up with talking about my mom, I'd be like, great, I will help, edit and make that the most amazing version of that. But came up with this idea he suggested, whereas like, if you meet me, you might find out that I love Kandinsky and Sinatra, and I want to learn languages. And then we outlined a version where it would go back and forth between that and the story of his mom. If you scroll down, you'll see this isn't exactly what happened. Um, Really, what happened, let's go a little bit more because there's a lot of this. I apologize. If we go further, I want to show you how it actually begins. Even further than this, um, he ended up talking about jazz, and he said something in session 4. Everyone hates jazz in Brazil. And I was like, I don't know why. That feels like an opening line. And so again, that's part of what an essay coach does. An essay coach talks, hears, that's his line. But part of what an essay coach's intuition and experience is what's going to grab your attention. Because, and this even speaks to the person asking about getting a flavor of every a kid's personality. I have to believe that in some cases, the first read of this essay will be a skim, that someone might just be like, let me read the first few lines, see if it grabs me. Let me read the topic sentences to make sure there's a story. Let's see where they end. Okay, I like this person. Now I'll read it more slowly. So that is part of the reason to make sure the opening grabs and that there's a clear structure so that the reader knows they're in good hands. Because if they like a kid, if they like this, they will read it slowly. It's a very important part of the application. But if it seems sloppy or if it just begins in a boring way, you don't know how many essays that person is reading that day. And, that's just something to think about. We wish that all the systems work beautifully, but we have to fight for that attention, even though it's their job. So when he said everyone hates jazz in Brazil, I was like, let's try a version with that. So the first homework then was about where he sees jazz. He sees it in Kandinsky. I don't know if you know that artist, but that artist is a very fluid, jazzy way of painting, at least in my view. And we thought that maybe jazz would lead to mental health. It didn't exactly, but if you go down further, you'll see that this became the key of unlocking the structure. Let's go even more. Let's see where he gets a little bit deeper into this. Um, Mental health club. Yes. So basically, and we'll scroll down later, he starts with jazz. He talks about using art as an escape from his mom. So we already know this kid is curious and is not like processing some sort of trauma on the page. He's just telling the story of his life. But then the reason I said I think it's a good idea to write about your mom and your story is because you then found a mental health club and you pay it forward. So I'm always looking at the end of the day for what do you add to this college's campus? What do you add to the classroom? What do you add to the pool of people there? So even if the hardest thing someone went through, say, not in this case, was like an ACL tear and they were in the hospital for 6 months, if that's the whole story and it's just supposed to show resilience, sorry, not resilience, genuine resilience. But if that's not enough, because at the end of the day, I don't know what that resilient person's going to add to the conversation. So I'm always looking for a doer, someone who pays forward their experience. So if we keep scrolling down a little bit, you might see where we ended up on this one. Yes, everyone hates jazz in Brazil, or at least that's been my experience, whereas friends will trade favorite band recommendations for pop songs, sertaneja ballads. Okay, so the reader gets more to sense that this kid knows the culture. Um, Precisely 0 people want my jazz tips. He falls for it at age 11. He says he's not a musician. And then the topic sentence in paragraph 4 really hooks us in. Maybe I fell for jazz because at age 11, I needed it so much. Great. So we achieved the goal from our first session's conversation, which is I already like this kid. I already sense his curiosity and his love of culture before I learned something a little bit more difficult that could have had the potential of seeming like a self-pity story. There's no way this seems like self-pity now. Great. And just, I don't know if we'll get to it in this document, but part of the reason we chose the mental health stuff and the culture stuff is because, first of all, it really reflects who that person is. So I really feel like I'm in the room with him. It also seemed like a really interesting business applicant. So if he's applying to business schools, we felt the finance podcast was not going to be enough of a pop to make him be like, this is the business student we need in this room, especially because we knew for the schools he cared about, he was going to be able to talk about the finance podcast in either the Y Vanderbilt or I believe, I don't know if he applied to Michigan, but like some business experience things. That finance podcast was a great, second hit after this first home run that really made you go, I love this. I love this voice. I'm rooting for this kid. This kid is a doer, but without making it business, 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 which I just want to underline. The most important thing is this kid wasn't just business, 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 business. And we at LogicPrep believe that if we can get a kid's personality on the page and in a structure that makes us root for them, that is magic. So I'm not sure there is other stuff in here that's going to be really useful to us. But this was a really fun kid to work with. And he didn't think he could write about jazz. He had a little panic attack at session 5 being like, I'm so proud of my finance podcast. Can I actually just talk about jazz at the beginning? I love it, but is it fundamental enough? And I said, I really believe in it. I want you to show it to your dad. I want to show it to maybe one friend you trust. You show it to too many people early on, it's dangerous. They both loved it. I, of course, talked to the college advisor who was very excited by it. And after that moment, he got very excited. He was like, great, I do love jazz. So that was a bit of LogicPrep using our experience to encourage that much more bravery, and never letting something out of our hands we didn't think was going to be a win for the application, but maybe pushing him in a slightly different direction than he thought he was going to be in at the first moment. Great. So that is this essay. Does anyone have any questions about the process that led to it, either the essay or the finance podcast, or, you know?
While we're
Oh, wait, if
waiting,
you want to look at the, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
I
I
was
just wanted
gonna,
to show you the last paragraph. Came with a little bit of an insight. Like, he admitted that other Brazilians do like jazz. Like, like, it's not like, and that comes from pushing back, like, me or any essay coach being like, dude, you're not the only person in Brazil who likes jazz. So, like, having a sense of humor about it. And then, it's a great opening. It's even better because it comes back around in the end, where he admits that a lot of people like jazz. He even says what he might be at the campus at the end. He says, I'm going to be working hard in finance. So we really underline that as his goal. But whenever he has some free time, he's going to be at a club or a concert hall listening to jazz. And I think that's someone I want at my school. So it was a really, really successful essay.
That's awesome, David. Yeah. So any questions? This is going to be the last question session that we have, since we don't have time to go over our final case study for today. So any questions that you have, whether specifically about Unpacking or about the process in general, please put that in the Q&A for us. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar tomorrow. So if you have folks that were not able to join us today but wanted to, we'll be sending that out to everybody who registered, as well as everybody who's on our regular mailing list. We'll also be sending out a quick survey at the end of this as well. So we'd really appreciate it if you would take a moment and let us know, was this really helpful for you, or do you think we could have done better? Looks like we are getting our first question in the Q&A. So not related to this case study specifically, but are the essays the first thing the officer looks at from the student? I know that most processes are holistic, but is this the first piece of background they have? That's a great question. And that's actually one I can answer from my college admissions experience. So interestingly enough, the essay is actually the last piece that college advisors or that admissions folks will read when they're looking at your application. Typically, they start with a transcript. That is the first piece they look at because that takes the longest. You have to evaluate the classes, the grades, the trajectory, all of those things. So you do all of that first. After that, you typically will see recommendation letters, followed by testing, if applicable, for that student. And then only after that do the admissions folks actually look at the application itself. So that's not just the essay, but that includes demographic information and what major are you applying for and what your activities list is and all that. And all the way at the end of that application is where they read the essay. So they're actually getting a whole lot of background information about each student well before they ever get to the writing. And that's why the writing is such a great opportunity to really let yourself show personally who you are, because the admissions person already knows what classes you've taken, what grades you've gotten, what major you're applying to, what activities you've done over the years. They already know all of those things. And now they're going to apply all of that context to the story that you're telling them at the end of the application. Let's see. We have another question specifically about Enrique's application.
Mhm.
Did he mention his podcast in his writing at all?
Yes, in every school that he applied to, he mentioned it. If I can't remember with Vanderbilt, which he got into, I believe that year there was just a 300 word why Vanderbilt, but we made sure that if he talked about business clubs or a business class he wanted to take, he said something like, in this class, I can take what I learned from my finance podcast that I did in Brazil, especially from this guest speaker who told me this. In this business club, where I might join this, I might be part of the radio station if I can at your school because I learned how to talk to large groups of people. So it always found its way in, and he wrote about it on his resume. So by the time they read that, they had already learned that he did a finance podcast, and probably the college advisor said something about its reach or something, a few details to make it as impressive as it was.
Yeah, totally. That's a good thing to kind of bring up as well. So this, even for a college where maybe he was not able to, or sorry, we're going to skip past Maria here. Even for a college where he was not able to necessarily write, specifically about the podcast in an essay, it was still going to be in his activities, and that is still going and on his resume and still going to be a part of the application review process for
I
sure.
think I even asked who are doing your recommendations because I knew one of the recommenders in this case, I'm almost sure, was mentioning it. So it's like, great. So that's important. That's another piece of the puzzle that lets us know they're going to know about it. No one was going to mention jazz.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you can really use the essays as an opportunity to bring in something that doesn't show in the rest of your application and really give a whole new dimension to who you are as an applicant. Um, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions for the moment. So really quick, I'd love us to go through our parting advice for everybody, and just going to talk through a few things that you guys can keep in mind as we go forward.
That is
Dave?
the truth. Yeah, some students, it comes out really quickly. In 3 weeks, there's a draft that everyone loves that's pretty done and everyone's happy and it's amazing. In some cases, we'll go down that journey. It takes a while to get there. And in some cases, I'd say 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 10, we have to start a whole new draft together because they wake up and go, I don't think it's right. Or in talking to the parent and the whole team who cares about that student or the college advisor, it doesn't feel right. And what I just always underline is this happens every year. I wish it wasn't you who won the lottery, but you did, and it means nothing towards your eventual success. We have equal success with people who've written two, who had to put away their first application. It doesn't mean that you're on some weird track. It just means that wasn't the right idea, and it took this process to get to the right idea. But that's the promise we make. We're not going to let something out of our hands just because it's good but not great. It has to be great.
Absolutely. And then our second
Yep.
piece,
Yeah, I mean
kind of
that's
thing,
basically
right?
the way it is. Yeah,
And that this has
and
happened to
yeah,
my students. This has happened to David's students. This happens to everybody's students. It happens. It's okay. If it happens to you, we'll help you through it. Um, Next piece, kind of similar to what you were just talking about,
yeah,
like at its best, this work does not only get us to a winning essay that's going to, make your college application really stand out, but it
yeah.
also has a couple of other purposes as well.
Yeah, so this happens to whenever an essay coach gets this compliment, it makes them smile. It makes me smile. Some students are like, "Oh, through this process, I've learned how to be a better writer." And if they're doing the work, they almost can't help it because I'm not sure people learn personal, reflective, creative writing in schools, or if they do, it's just one chapter. But here, how do you be specific? How do you find a real structure? How do you make a reader feel like they're in the room with you? So both persuasive essays and creative essays and stories become really sharper, and often the kid emerges being a better writer. And the other thing is, it can clarify a student's goals. Some people come into this process knowing exactly what they want. That's amazing. Some students in the discussion with the essay coach, with the college advisor, with their family, as they put words on a paper, they realize I don't care about this major. I don't care as much as I thought I might want to do this major. Or if they have a major, they realize, oh no, this is how I want to use my 4 years in college, because together we have found three different opportunities at that school. So they hit the ground running, knowing the opportunities they might want to look at right away. So at its best, this can really clarify what they're going to do in that school once they get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that is our parting advice. I know David has to hop off since he has a student to meet with.
I have a
So
student right now.
thank you so much, David, for spending some time with us. Good
Yeah,
luck.
thank you, Olivia, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope it was useful, and I look forward to either guiding the essay coaches who are working with kids you might or might not be sending to us, and or if I do, I can't wait to meet them. Cheers.